When you have one or more direct reports who aren't consistently taking the initiative and waiting for you to give them specific direction before they move projects forward, it can be incredibly frustrating as a manager. However, before you write those individuals off as incompetent, take a listen to my latest episode of The Happy Leader. In it, I'm going to talk to you about how I've seen some leaders unintentionally train their team not to take initiative. This episode will help you discern if you've fallen into that trap, and if so, what to do to get out of it. Welcome to The Happy Leader. I'm Amy Sanchez, executive coach to some of the most innovative leaders and teams in Silicon Valley. I'll share stories and tips to help you navigate the most common leadership challenges so you can amplify what matters most: happiness. As a leader, there is no shortage of priorities. And when you feel like your team is waiting for you to tell them what to do or how to move the ball forward, it can just add to your stress and overwhelm. I have worked with a number of leaders who have come to me and said, Amy, I can't figure out why my team won't take more initiative. And it's incredibly frustrating. The good news is that there are very small but impactful changes that you can implement pretty immediately that will enable you to start getting projects off your plate and into the hands of your direct reports who can start taking more initiative. So it will free you up for more pockets of time where you can focus on that strategic work that you really want to get to. Now, when leaders come to me with this complaint that their team really is waiting for them to give them specific direction, I ask them one thing: how empowered does your team feel? Almost every time the answer that I get to this question is, I don't know. So this is really your first key, is if your team really feels empowered, if they know that you trust them, if they know what they're doing and they've been trained appropriately and they have enough background information, then giving them the right level of support, which I'm going to talk to you about what that looks like, is really going to help them fly. And it's going to help them feel comfortable driving things forward without having to pull you into every decision and moving you into that micromanagement role. Here's the deal. When we move from individual contributor to a manager of people, the way that we work needs to fundamentally change. Now, I know that we all know this at a really high level, but unless your company has given you former leadership or management training, there are likely things that you're doing in this manager role that worked for you as an individual contributor that are actually working in a negative way as a manager. As a manager, you now have people who can take things off your plate and help you be more efficient. And oftentimes managers will tell me, well, Amy, the people on my team are just not strong enough. They're not trained well enough. They don't know what they want. They don't know what I need. And in general, what we see from human behavior is that people want to do well. They want to please you. They want to be praised. They want to be accepted. They want to feel a valuable part of the team that they're on. This is at the core of all human behavior. So in reality, usually when I hear managers telling me that their team is just not adept, I know that there's probably something deeper going on. Now, some of the language that I hear when managers come to me with this frustration can sound like, oh, my team just doesn't work as hard as me, or so-and-so direct report doesn't work as hard as me. My team just doesn't know what they need, so they wait for me to give them direction. Or my team doesn't know how to move the ball forward, and so I have to be pulled into every single decision that they make, even though they've been in their role for years. The other thing that I hear is, oh, so-and-so is just here to collect a paycheck. I don't think they're ever going to be management material, or they just aren't thinking strategically. Now, all of these things are incredibly frustrating if this is your core assumption that your team is just not up to snuff. But I'm going to give you some strategies to try to see if that really is the case, if your team isn't up to snuff. And if so, then you need to take corrective action by getting them off your team onto a performance management program. But more likely than not, there are things that you can do just from the way that you manage that can help. 90% of the time, what I find is really happening is that the manager has unintentionally trained their direct reports to become overly reliant on their feedback before doing anything. As a manager who is investing so much extra time in listening or watching this right now, this may be hard to hear because you're putting so much time and energy into your job. The good news is I'm going to share with you how to get from feeling frustrated that your direct reports are not taking initiative to moving them out of this over-reliance on you. Now, to bring this to life, I want to share a story from the Silicon Valley archives. One, so you can see how this plays out, but two, just so you know that you're not alone, because this is a super, super common complaint that I hear. I once worked with a leader who had been rapidly promoted through the ranks, but had never received any formal leadership training, which is quite common, by the way. He was a fast learner. He was a hard worker. He was extremely resourceful about figuring things out with very little guidance. And he knew how to bridge gaps when they arose. And so by nature, he expected his direct reports to be able to do the same. What he didn't recognize is that they didn't have the insight, training, drive, motivation, whatever that he had naturally brought to the table, that he needed to help bridge some gaps for them. Let's call this leader Oscar. This ambition and devotion was rewarded by a promotion to a senior position. But along the way, Oscar had started to take on habits that had made him an excellent individual contributor, but they were actually working against him as a manager. As an individual contributor, when Oscar had a problem that needed solving, he would dive in head first and he would figure out how to solve it. Oscar was the Mr. Fix-It. Everybody went to him when there was a challenge to be solved, and they knew that Oscar could figure it out. This is one of the reasons that he was rewarded with this promotion to management. Now, when he became a people manager and problems would arise, he applied the same playbook. Jump in and fix it. That's what worked for him as an individual contributor. That's what he had received positive praise and recognition for. So naturally, he applied the same playbook. Here was the challenge for Oscar. This knee-jerk reaction taught his team to simply turn to him when they ran into challenges instead of trying to fix it themselves. When they came to Oscar for help, Oscar would automatically grab the project and take it over, thinking that their cry for help was really them saying, I can't figure this out. And Oscar thinking in his head, well, my team has to deliver, so let me just cut to the chase, make this quick, and take it over because I know how to do it immediately. Whereas if I try to teach them how to do it, it will take longer. But what's really interesting as we sort of back up to how Oscar trained his team to take less initiative is in the beginning, when Oscar had inherited this team, he had started by swooping in and challenging their approach. The team had, in the beginning, was trying to do the work themselves, were trying to proactively come to him with their ideas. And because Oscar had a high need for control, he would often challenge their ideas and replace them with his own. This taught the team pretty early on that any stretch of work that didn't have Oscar's oversight and detailed guidance was a waste of time, because Oscar would end up challenging it anyway. In short, he was in the habit of micromanaging his team, but he had no idea that this was happening. His team had been trained to let Oscar take the reins when things got challenging. This went on for a couple of years, and as a result of this, unfortunately, members of Oscar's team never really grew or developed because they didn't learn the core skills and the capabilities needed to excel in their role. They didn't have the opportunities to grow and stretch and be coached and learn how to progress in their career and to take initiative. This wasn't a company that invested in training, and Oscar was just too hands-on to coach them to learn. So when he hired me, Oscar was buried. He was working long hours with little reprieve. He didn't have a single person on his team who he considered next in line for his job. In fact, when he looked at his team, he considered them mostly C players. As he described his day, and as he went back and sort of audited what he was doing through the day, his day was filled with putting out fires and looking over the work of his direct reports. As he was promoted further up in the organization, this inability to spend time on strategic work and strategic planning became a major gap and a disadvantage among his peers who did have time for that strategic level thinking. He knew he had to find a way out of his conundrum. When Oscar's company brought me in to work with him, I started first by giving him a new approach to working with his team. First, we talked about how to set goals and expectations. So we started really at the 10,000 foot level. Instead of building these goals in solidarity, which was very much Oscar's style, he started to build these goals in collaboration with his team. The process of building goals with the team member involved meant that they now had this new voice that they were able to contribute to building out what their future goals were. This started to pique his direct reports' curiosity and also increase their buy-in and initiative as it related to their projects. They now had a hand in planning what they were going to work on and laying out the goals for it. Therefore, there was an emotional investment in this new project. Next, with Oscar, I taught him to apply a coaching method when his direct reports came to him with challenges. Instead of giving them the answer when his direct reports came to him with challenges or taking it over so that they could move really fast and get past this challenging hump, he learned how to slow down and ask the right questions to let his team think through challenges versus taking over the work as soon as the challenges arose. By partnering with his team to think through these challenges and placing the right open-ended questions throughout the conversation to help them think it through, this really brought out a new level of strategic thinking from his team and allowed them to really feel like they were a part of the project and they owned the project, which was a really key ownership change from Oscar back to the direct report. Finally, the last thing I did with Oscar was talk to him about the best approach to take with each team member during their weekly check-ins. I introduced him to this concept of situational leadership. And if you haven't heard what that is, I'm going to talk about it a little bit further on in this podcast. He learned how to decipher which style to apply to each direct report based on how skilled they were with each project. The result of these 3 changes significantly changed the level of initiative for each one of Oscar's direct reports. He saw improvements after just a few weeks. He began to see a new sense of ownership from his team, and he began to see them think through challenges independently. His direct reports also began to become more creative with their solutions and innovative and started to speak up more. They had this new sense of empowerment and ownership. He also started to implement some of the ideas that he heard from his team. They were on the front line and they were exposed to things that Oscar was not, and they had some really good ideas. As he started to implement the ideas that came from his direct report and give them recognition when those ideas were voiced at higher level meetings, it really helped to elevate the department and increase efficiency. It also increased their motivation because suddenly they felt valuable and recognized. After just a few months' time, Oscar noticed that several members of his team were more skilled than he had previously given them credit for. And he began to infuse their weekly check-ins with development conversations. He was starting to find free pockets of time that enabled him to focus on the strategic work that he really needed to spend time on. There were 1 or 2 employees that weren't able to step up in the way he needed, and he knew then that he had to rethink their long-term role on the team. Oscar moved from working in the weeds daily to empowering his team to do the groundwork with his coaching and support. It was a true team transformation, and everyone was thriving with the new changes. If you can relate to Oscar's story and you find yourself or someone in your organization constantly in the weeds with their team, here are the steps that you or them can take to implement to free up time to be more focused on the strategic work. Number 1, take a close look at how you set goals with each member of the team. Have you set goals in a collaborative method so you can create buy-in and alignment? If not, share the larger organizational goals with your direct reports and then together collaboratively develop goals they can shoot for to help them be successful. Use the SMART goal methodology to help with this. And if you don't know what SMART goals are, check out the notes section for a video to help you with this. The second thing that you'll want to do is set up regular check-ins with your direct reports. And during these check-ins, here's what you'll want to do. Let your direct reports drive these largely and give you updates on their progress. When they get stuck, use a coaching methodology to help. that means asking open-ended questions instead of closed-ended questions. So here's what that sounds like. Instead of, hey, ask Sam to help you with that, you would say, who can you ask to help you with that? Or instead of, try watching some videos on LinkedIn to get clues how to do this, you can say, where can you go to learn more about this? The key is to ask questions that cannot be one-word yes/no answers that really pulls out their thinking and enables them to deliver the solution to you. Now, if they get stuck after the open-ended questions, of course, give them some guidance, but try this first to really enable them to start thinking on their own. Number 3. Use situational leadership. This was developed by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard. You might have heard of it. It's a very well-known management framework. Situational leadership will help you determine which approach you take with each task your direct report consults you on. If your direct report has low competence but high commitment with the task that you're reviewing, tell them how to complete it. If they have some competence but low commitment, give them direction and a high level of support. If they have moderate to high competence and variable commitment, apply low direction and high support. And finally, if they have high competence and high commitment, your role is low directive and low supportive behavior. They have it handled. If you want to see more information about this model, check out my notes and you can see exactly how this is mapped out to help you think about how to approach that next task with your direct report. Now, if you or your company need any help with this or want to dive deeper into a specific situation, reach out to me to explore executive coaching or training or team development workshops. There's a lot that we can do together. You can contact me through my website, swim-against.com for Swim Against the Current. In the meantime, be sure to take care of yourself and your team and continue to look for ways to increase the happiness all around you. Thanks for listening to The Happy Leader. If you would like more information about me, Amy Sanchez, and our executive coaching and team leadership services at Swim Against the Current, visit swim-against.com. And if you liked this podcast, help others who could use the support find it by giving us a rating. Until next time, life is short. Stay happy.